All right. Hey, welcome to How We Build Trust in the Midst of Crisis and Recovery. It is just a treat to have so many of you around the world. I know there's 500 on Zoom, there's 500 or so on Teams, families, friends on the YouTube live stream. So wherever you are, we know we have Zimbabwe and East Africa. We know we have Quebec and India. We know we have our friends all throughout Europe and across the United States. And so we are grateful that you joined us for this. And here's what we're going to do. I want to just there's a variety of people with a variety of familiarity with our work. So we go back to my grad work. When I started looking at trust, I'm going to give a quick little overview in the first few minutes. And then we're going to talk about some ways that I've seen leaders that I'm walking with build trust in the midst of crisis and recovery. So let's get started. Remember, you can chat with me. I'll be seeing the chat. My team is on chat. They're going to be putting some extra resources in all throughout the whole session. And we'll go through the whole session. And I know several of you want to see why we shifted part of what we do at Trust Edge Leadership Institute, not just to the research piece, which we will continue to offer and give you, but also to this way of coaching so that you can use this work wherever you are in the world. And we'll give you a 3-minute little thought on that at the end, only if you're interested. So here we go. Appreciate that. Thanks for the comments already. And great to hear from you. So many friends, so many of our certified coaches, and some people we're just getting to know right now. I'm David Horsager. I'm the CEO of Trust Edge Leadership Institute. And, in 1999 or so, I started thinking differently about trust. That led to some grad work and books and thoughts. And now I believe more than ever, a lack of trust is the biggest expense we have. I believe everything of value is built on trust. I believe it's always a trust issue at the root. That's always the root cause. It's never, as an example, it's never a leadership issue. The only reason we follow a leader is because we trust them or not. It's never a sales issue unless it's a commodity. The only reason we buy from a person is because we trust them or not. It's not even a innovation issue. The only way to increase innovation in a company is increase trust in the team, where you create a safe environment where people all share ideas. And this is something, by the way, that's happening in this virtual environment. What are some of the positives of the virtual environment? Well, CEOs are communicating more than ever before. Humanization is happening. Some of you are Zooming your CEOs and you're seeing a cat jump on their keyboard and their 4-year-old running their undies behind them. And all of a sudden we're seeing people as humans. And trust is at the core. When we can see each other as human, it enables, by the way, learning. Some of you are in learning development. The only way to teach in a classroom or anywhere is if I create a safe, high trust environment. Some of us think diversity is the issue. Well, the biggest Harvard study would show diversity on its own pits people against each other unless there's trust. It's never at the core a marketing issue. The only way to amplify a marketing message is increase trust in the message. We have to think bigger about trust before we can get into how we do increase trust in crisis or in recovery. So as we think bigger about trust, we have to see it always hits the bottom line. It always affects everything. In fact, the number one question everybody's asking about you, the number one question you're asking about me right now, the number one question people are asking from your closest relationships to your company to your team is not, do I like you? I've got friends I like a lot. I wouldn't go into business with them in a million years because I don't trust them. The number one question everybody's asking about you is, can I trust you? And trust affects time. It affects the bottom line. So let's take a 1-minute look at a story and come back to the research. You know, the first time I saw the economic impact of trust was, I grew up in Verndale, Minnesota. It's 500 people. I didn't grow up there. I grew up 8 miles from there on a 1,500-acre bean farm out in the middle of nowhere in the poorest county in Minnesota. It's about 3 hours drive from Minneapolis, St. Paul. What do I remember? Driving home from town. Halfway home, at the end of his long dirt driveway, Mr. Olson's veggie stand, produce stand. In the midst of the beans and broccoli and beautiful vegetables, there was a box with cash bills sticking out of the box. But nobody worked the stand. What are you supposed to do at Mr. Olson's stand? That's right, make your own change and pay what you owe. We call this system the honor system or trust system. And where you can create it, it is the most efficient system you can possibly create. Of course, this doesn't mean I should trust everyone. There are good reasons not to trust, but where I can create this in my team, my company, my organization, I've just created the greatest efficiency I can create. So when we take a look at this, let's go ahead and fill the chat. I know, you can use either chat. 521 of you, we got the max out on Zoom. So all of you that get to go to the Overflow Live room on YouTube, we're seeing your chats also. So feel free to jump in. In one word, how would you define trust? If you had to define trust with one word, go ahead and chat with me. How would you define trust with one word? And I can see a couple different places here. But, okay, honor, faith, vulnerability, integrity, confidence, respect, consistency. Isn't that true? Whatever you do consistently, good or bad, is trusted, right? If you're late all the time, I will in fact trust you to be late. If you don't wear enough clothes, I might trust you're Kardashian, right? So we trust whatever you do consistently. We trust accountability, congruence, transparency, compassion. All of these are true. Thank you from around the world. It's so fun to see some of our friends from around the world. Belief, morals, integrity, being intentional, positive character. Thank you. So let's go forward with this. Empathy. I'm going to give a brief overview of our work because we want to get into how we deal with this in crisis and recovery. So just to make sure we're all on the same page, this is how we defined it out of the Institute and how we continue to define it today in our work. Trust is a confident belief in a person, product, or an organization. And that sums up much of what you said. You said right there on the chat, reliable and dependable and all those things. But when we define it, we define this as a confident belief in a person, product, or an organization. And this is what that original research showed. Hundreds of organizations, thousands of leaders, way back in my grad work, and now out of the Institute, we've confirmed this every year. When trust increases, this is what happened. Every time trust goes up, output, morale, retention, productivity, innovation, loyalty, they all go up. Every time cost, problems, skepticism, time to getting done, it all went down. It doesn't mean I believe you should trust everyone. There are good reasons not to trust. But when you increase trust in this way, you gain what I believe is the greatest advantage you can gain in relationships, in life, and in business. And that's something we've come to call the trust edge. So a little glimpse, 2 minutes on the newest research, and then we'll jump into how do we build it in crisis, because right now, in crisis and in recovery is your greatest opportunity. A glimpse of the research, and we're giving access to everybody to the newest, the white papers, the new 2020 Trust Outlook white paper on our research. It's a plus or minus study. The U.S. side, plus or minus margin of error, 1.7%. Global study, 1.8%. I think it's one of the biggest pieces of research on trust and leadership. certainly out of North America, but even as a global study, though there are others. What did we find on the last several years running? The number one reason someone wants to work for an organization ahead of being paid more, ahead of more autonomy, ahead of a more fun work environment with a ping pong table, you know? Number one, people want to trust their leadership more than anything else. If you think trust doesn't affect the bottom line, half of Americans said they invested $1,000 or more based purely on trust. Trust always affects the bottom line. You think of a lock business. The only reason I put a lock on anything is a lack of trust. And wherever there's a lack of trust, there's a cost. What's the cost of putting a lock on something? The money for the lock, that's dollars. That's cost. The time to open it, that's probably the bigger cost. Wherever you have a lack of trust, you have a cost. And you have an incredible opportunity right now to build it. So a couple more data points. 9 out of 10 Americans would not refer products or services they don't trust. Net Promoter Score, if you use it in your company, it's a great white paper, a great study. It's the question, NPS is the question, would we refer you to someone else? And that's a sticky question. If you refer, that goes beyond loyalty, that goes to intentional. I will refer you. That's powerful. The problem is we don't increase trust. Referrals don't get referrals. The only way to increase referrals is increase trust. It's the same with some other ways we measure. We don't get engagement with engagement. The only way to increase engagement in an organization is increase trust. It's always at the core a trust issue. So one more data point here, 92% of people in last year's study, 92% said they trust their senior leader more if they were more transparent about their mistakes. And this hit me over the head. But this is interesting because my oldest daughter, I'm on a walk with her. She's a teenager at the time. And I'll never forget this. And it pointed to this finding later. We're walking, and she said, I don't know if it was about boys or grades or what. She said, Dad, you wouldn't understand because you're perfect. And you and I both know that's sweet to be their hero at 3 years old, but you got a problem if that's what they're saying at 15 or 13. And you want a healthily confident daughter, but I knew I needed to do something different. See, many people read the top of this. 92% of people would trust their leader more if they were more transparent about their mistakes. These days, I get to sit by presidents of countries and presidents of companies. I get to sit by heads of pro sports teams, and what I see is imposter syndrome with leaders that are scared to death they're going to be found out. And they need someone to listen to, and they need someone to be real, and they need someone to love them. But the deal here is you got to be transparent about your mistakes. And what I learned about my oldest daughter, she saw me fly to things like this, get picked up by a sedan, go on a jet, do this, speak. The kids often would come with me. But she didn't see all the stuff that happened, everything that happens that my wife knows and everybody else knows. So I made an intention. Once a week when we go on a walk, I started sharing the times I failed, the time I bought everything, used all of our money to buy a business and lost everything right before she was born. The time I made this mistake, the time I don't need to go into therapy now, but I just started to share all the mistakes I've made, or many of them. What happened to our relationship? Just changed forever, that's all. So a couple thoughts based on the comments you've made. Someone said it takes a long time to build trust. There's a truth to that, but what I learned in my original research is trust is more complex than we think. You know, trust can take a long time to build, but in a moment of crisis, here in the U.S., like 9/11, if people after 9/11, complete strangers trust each other in a moment if they're running in the same direction. A whole lot of your trust is built and lost in a moment. We can think confidence is trusted, for example, and it can be, but if it leads to arrogance, then it's not trusted. We can think if I extend more trust to my team, I'll get more out of them, and that's often true until I extend too much. We can think transparency is trusted, right? Be transparent, like I just talked about in that video. And it is critical for leaders to be more transparent most of the time. But remember, confidentiality confidentiality is also trusted. So we have to think bigger about trust. And of course, that's going to be for another time. But I want to give the overview, the first half of the research, just so we're on the same page. The big finding in those days and continues to be a lack of trust is the biggest cost we have. Everything of value is built on trust. Where people or culture is concerned, the leading indicator is always trust. So the why was trust. It affected everything. And when I started this work, I was just looking for what's unique about the most successful organizations, leaders, global governments in the way I defined it. That kept coming back as trust. But that then begged the question in the research, well, then how do I build it? Is it just honesty or integrity, or is there more to it? So once again, we have to understand just briefly for context, the 8-pillar framework before we get into the 8 or 9 ways that you can build trust, or that I've seen leaders building it in crisis. We have to understand this because we solve against these. Here they are. Very briefly, we talk a whole day about every one of these. We'll give you lots more assets on these if you'd like, and or you can meet with and have help from many of our certified coaches around the world that have access to help you, and they do it, and they affect attrition, they affect sales. We use this work to affect wins on football teams even. So let me give you the overview of the 8 pillars. Here they are. Number 1 is clarity. What we learned, we trust people that are clear, not ambiguous, or overly complex. Some people are losing because they want to look smart and are overly complex. And whenever we overcomplexify something beyond what is needed, we lose clarity, which loses trust. Number 2 is compassion. Compassion is critical in this time. Understanding, empathizing, seeing where people are. Showing, the number 1 word that came out of this part of the research was intent. I trust those that have pure intent. I won't be accountable to someone that doesn't have care for me or intent for me. This is, by the way, the research shows the number 1 most trusted person in the world to the most people is mom. Number 3, character. People trust those that do what's right over what's easy. And actually, let's put in the chat box the 7 ways a company can build an organization of high character. 7 steps. The last question would be something, if you're a leader, and many of you are on this webinar, ask the question every quarter, are we doing anything to systemize against the character we want to have? Because some of you are incentivizing something to get sales that's against the character you actually want to have as an organization. Number 4 is competency. The point on this one is we trust people that stay fresh and relevant and capable. If you're still leading the way you were 20 years ago, I probably don't trust you. If you're teaching the way you were 10 years ago, I probably don't trust you. You've got to stay fresh and relevant and capable in the way you want to be trusted. This is why I might trust you to take my kids to the ball game, but I may not trust you to give me a root canal because of being fresh and relevant and capable. So number 5 is commitment. We trust those that stay committed even in the face of adversity. And this is true if you think of anybody that's left a legacy in your life or in history, your mom, your dad, your first grade teacher, Martin Luther King, Mandela, Gandhi, Jesus, or Joan of Arc. And you will find somebody that's stayed committed to something beyond themselves and they're trusted for it. Next pillar, connection. We trust those that stay, that connect, that, if I see an organization that has siloing or is protecting their budget too much or protecting their resources or isn't thinking beyond themselves, we have a huge problem here. So the pillar of kind of connection and collaboration, we can go deeper on it. Number 7 is contribution. The first word that came out of this research funnel was results. You got to get results. We trust people that get results, right? You could be the most compassionate surgeon I ever met, but if you go into surgery, we have to have an amputation, you cut off the wrong leg, we got a problem. You got to deliver results. So you need all 8, and the final pillar is consistency. Sameness is trusted. I said it before, if you're late all the time, I will trust you to be late. This is why we might trust McDonald's even if we don't like them. We could trust them. I've had the same burger on 6 continents. Sameness is trusted. This is why we don't like moody people. Are you going to be happy, sad, mad, cry? I would rather have an angry curmudgeon every day that I can manage because I know how they're going to show up every day than all over the place. Sameness is trusted, and consistency builds reputation for an individual. It builds a brand for a company, right? So that's the 8-pillar framework. I know it's a brief, but just to understand, this is how it just got revalidated from a big university. If you'd like to see the evidence of these 8 are the way to build trust. Doesn't mean I know everything about it. Doesn't mean you don't have to contextualize for the work you're doing in your part of the world or for a pro sports team or a business or a nonprofit. But I hope without a shred of ego, I can say with confidence and a whole lot of research, you can solve every leadership and organizational issue against these 8. These 8 are the critical issues. When you look at these, people will tell me sometimes, we got a communication issue. At the core, it is never a communication issue. Clear communication is trusted. Unclear communication is not. Compassionate is trusted. Hateful communication is not trusted. Consistent is, inconsistent isn't. High character is, low character isn't. It's like we have an engagement issue. You might have an engagement issue, but the only way to solve it is against the 8-pillar framework. When you language it this way, you have the right, you're using the right things to actually affect the change you want to have. It's one of these 8. So that's an overview. We can talk about that later. Now, let's get to our timing for today. And I know with over 1,000 people on, my team is answering questions for you, but feel free to keep asking questions. Some of these we might even get to after the event, but I will try to keep glancing down at these so that we make sure this is relevant to you. Let's take a look at this. Your greatest opportunity to build trust the fastest is in crisis and recovery. Many people think it's isn't it in first interaction? No. Here in America, once again, when was George W. Bush the most trusted as president? The week after 9/11. How you respond as leaders to a crisis, how you recover from any kind of crisis, and we're all in different phases. Some of you in certain parts of the world, some of this COVID, the lockdowns are happening right now, just starting. Some of you've kind of opened up in your part of the world. People have taken different tacks on it. It doesn't matter. Your opportunity to build trust the fastest is in crisis and recovery. It's also your opportunity to lose trust the fastest. We've seen it happen. I've seen leaders do terrible things in recent weeks, and they've lost trust that'll affect them and their organization for decades. I've also seen I've seen a masterclass on a CEO, how he let go 2,000 people that he had to let go in hopes that they would be able to come back in 9 months. And the way he did it has increased trust throughout that organization. So here's where we are. This is your opportunity. Trust matters right now more than ever. So what are some things I'm seeing from the leaders that I'm walking with or serving or our institute is serving? What am I seeing them do very well when they're increasing trust in the midst of crisis? You'll see that each of these in some way comes under one of the 8 pillars of trust. One thing I'm seeing is they're taking an active approach. As I watch some, they're putting their head in the sand. They've said, oh, they've waited too long. And the leaders that I'm walking with that are doing this well, they're jumping right in, they're being transparent, and they're taking an active approach. I have a friend, CEO of a great company, and he went to U.S. Army War College in the 80s, and when he landed, in Afghanistan, he said, the first time I kind of got dropped out of a helicopter on that sand, he said, I thought I was prepared. We went to all this training and everything. But when I landed there in the middle of the night on the front lines, it was totally different than I ever thought it would be. But they taught something at War College, and it came back to him in that moment. VUCA, volatility. The V stands for volatility. They'll put this in the chat for you. Volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. And when you have a situation where you see too much volatility, complexity, a lot of people get shot, hurt, or because right away they stand up, they don't pause and think, okay, we've got some volatility, we've got some uncertainty. They just pause for a moment and they notice and they become aware. And then they ask 2 questions. What can I control and what should I do first? What can I control? Right now, what can I control? Because there's always way more than you think. It's been unbelievable to see people stretch themselves and see they can control a whole lot more than they ever thought in this time. And then, what now? So this is what's happening on our little hobby farm these days. Isn't that a cute chick? It is cutie. The thing is, they don't come out this way. This is what actually happens. Isn't that beautiful? Well, here's what happens. They have a rebirth. And, it was interesting because, all the kids are home having school at home these days. And at the same time this was happening, my daughter was studying the Renaissance. And what she asked Alexa, what does Renaissance mean? And of course, it means rebirth. And that's exactly what a chick goes through. The egg comes, but then it takes 21 days of fairly perfect incubation for the chick to start doing the work. What happens? The chick pips, it pecks. And if they do the work, 12, 18, maybe even more hours, they finally come out. But they have to do that work. In the midst of this time, it was interesting to think about Renaissance. The companies that I'm walking with or that I'm watching are really, they're not thinking, how do we shift 10%? They're thinking, how do we shift 200%? They're not thinking necessarily, not our mission, we have the same mission, but how could we do it totally differently? Because we can still go back to how we did it, but we have to think of a way to do this totally different, to rebirth, to renaissance, to shift completely. And the problem is it takes a lot of work, and many that I'm seeing that are losing right now are not willing to do the work. They're waiting. They're waiting for recovery to just happen. They're waiting for certain things to happen. And this is what happens. Our kids, some of them want to help that chick. The chick starts pecking through and making a pip. And they want to help. What happens if you help? It's like a butterfly. It dies. It needs to do that work. In fact, this one that you saw here stopped. And it didn't keep doing the work. And it died in the shell. So one thing I'm noticing with the CEOs I'm working with is they're doing the work, and they're certainly feeling the weight of responsibility, but they're actively approaching the crisis and recovery. Second idea, for what I'm noticing, the leaders that are doing well in this time, they're dealing with tension. My daughter plays the violin, and if the strings are too loose, it sounds terrible. If the strings are too tight, it sounds terrible. But if the strings are just right, we have a chance. If they're just the perfect tension, then the music is beautiful and clear. But it has to be the right tension. If you're an entrepreneur or a business leader, you're dealing in a whole lot of tensions. And we can't look at all of them, but you're thinking, should I persevere or should I pivot? Some people have pivoted too early. Some people have persevered right off the cliff. Some people have lost because they weren't willing to persevere. Should I take a risk? Should I stay safe? Should I be patient? Should I act now? Should I go generalizing to everybody, or should we specialize? Should we be diverse, or should we focus on homogeneity or niche? Should we show value, or should we discount? Should we get or give? Should we be more transparent or more confidential? Let me just talk about 3 of these tensions. And I've been writing a lot more on tensions. There'll be a book coming out someday on this, I think. But because the leaders that I see doing this well are really able to weigh out the tension. I mean, we have tensions as simple as, we're told, the early bird gets the worm, right? But be patient. Well, what should I do now? So let's look at the bottom 3 tensions, because this is where I've noticed in the midst of the last 8 weeks and the next 90 days, it's going to be critical to think about these with a bias toward one over the others. On the bottom one, showing value versus a discount. I'm seeing some people do discounting they're just without empathy. They're kind of like the COVID-19 discount. I think in this time, the leaders and the organizations that are doing it well are having a bias toward value. How can we serve? How can we help over discount? I think they're having a bias in this time toward give over get. The truth is we all need to get paid, right? We have to get. But in this time, they're starting by giving. One of my dear friends, and we went through our master's degree together, and he was the the director of Minneapolis-St. Paul International Airports. He's now a consultant, and he's consulted on airport projects from Copenhagen to Salt Lake City. And on one of his big airport projects, right when all of this happened, the airlines industry and airports were like, what are we going to do? And he helped this airport. He's so great at bringing unions together. And, an airport, a big airport, is everything from policing to food service. It's a whole city, right? And when he brought that team, before they went in and talked to the union to us, he said, what all can we give? What could we give? And the rental car companies, he knew they were going to come and say, we can't pay. Nobody's renting cars. We can't pay. But we can't pay for parking. And this airport said, well, we need to get that pay. We don't have a place for that parking. And then they came up with an idea and they said, well, what could we give? Well, that whole runway isn't going to be used. Why don't you park all your cars on that runway for free for 4 months? And all of a sudden they started from this place of giving, and it's changing what's happening in the preparation for the future at that airport, because he's so good at taking people to give first. And then, yeah, we'll have to get in some way to stay alive. The other bias that I'm seeing great leaders have right now in this time is a bias toward transparency over confidentiality. There are things, earnings calls and many other reasons to have confidentiality that could affect people negatively or isn't appropriate. But the great leaders I'm walking with, at least, are starting with transparency. Here's where we are. In fact, I talked to one last night, and he started by, hey, here's our books. Here's why we're cutting all these people, and everybody else is getting a pay cut, including me, and this is what's happening. And that openness, it changed the way people even left. In fact, I talked to someone who got let go from that organization, and he said, of course it's terrible. It's terrible for our family. It's terrible for my livelihood. But the way they did it, given the situation, I can't think of a better way. So they start with showing value in this time. They start by giving in this time, and they start with transparency. That's what I've noticed when they're dealing with specifically those tensions. Next idea that I've noticed people in this time that are leading well, they're leading with compassion. They're starting with empathy. They're starting with compassion. The truth is, even of the over 1,000 people on this call, many are fairly privileged. And yet, many of your people have someone who's affected physically by COVID, maybe a grandparent, maybe a person. Many of you, you have someone they're in a tiny little shelter or home or apartment, and the kids are trying to do school around that one table, and maybe the wife is trying to do work from there, and maybe the husband just got laid off. And if you don't start with empathy, you don't have a chance at trust. This falls under the compassion pillar. Also, what I've noticed is leaders in organizations start by leading with compassion by trying to put their feet in their shoes. One of the big, great emergency hospitals that we work with has done some things very well. But what it took was the senior leaders going and walking on the COVID floor, and walking and having to put a mask on all day for 12 hours and feeling what that felt like. They didn't know that lips get chapped. They didn't know that it felt like this, but then they started providing certain things. One of the things they noticed in the children's area was kids come in and they see a hazmat suit or they see a mask and they're scared to death, and they won't take the treatment or the shot that they need because there's a 4-year-old is so scared. It looks like a scary clown, right? So they changed one thing. They made these big buttons with the real face of the nurse on it. And those nurses got trained and to say, hey, this is really me. Okay, now come on up here. I have to wear this because of something, but this is me. And the kid will look in the eyes, and they're able to do the jobs because they're thinking ways, how can I lead with compassion? As long as we're on healthcare, nurses are some of the most emotionally affected, actually, over doctors and over others. Actually, in healthcare, they're being incredibly overworked in certain places right now, and they're under-equipped in many ways. So one hospital noticed this. We went through a process, and they started doing a meeting like this. It's a simple idea that can be done even virtually. They've got thousands of nurses, and these nurses are worn out. And part of it is the PSTD and emotional issues with it. And they started having meetings, even with 100 at a time, because they couldn't break them up into smaller, which would have been good. And right on Zoom, we had them start asking 3 questions. And those nurses felt more connected and more cared about and more equipped to do their job. They started by saying, hey, just write down, because you can't hear from 100 people on Zoom, right? So they said, write down how you're feeling right now. So a nurse would just write down on their piece of paper, and they would say, oh, okay. And the leader would just look at them and empathize. Yep. But we have to take them somewhere, right? So then they would say, now on the other side, write a word for what are you most hopeful about? And they'd write something down. And they would say, then finally they would say, what's one thing you could do today to be more hopeful or affect change or some action point? And those meetings started bringing people together and showing compassion in a way that people were surprised about the outcome, which was very positive. So another idea. I'm seeing leaders right now in this time. In fact, I had the privilege of being in a boardroom where a leader said, okay, we've got all these priorities. We got to throw them all out, and we got to create one. What's our one priority? We often say here, and Collins and others have said it first, if you have more than 3 push forward priorities, you don't have any. More than 3, you don't have any. But in a time of crisis, boiling it down from 3 as a team to 1. That's what I've noticed. Another idea is they overconnect with their people. And let me say one more thing. Keep going here. Okay. It's interesting today. Verizon said in years past, Mother's Day was the #1 call volume day in North America. And since COVID, every single day has doubled the number of Mother's Day calls. And CEOs are connecting more than they ever have with their people. And that's a good thing. Introverts are being noticed more than they ever have. The introverts, it turns out, are willing to share more through Zoom and some of these kind of things. So you're doubling the ideas that you would get just in a live room. There's a lot of positives, but connecting with people, being present with people, this is critical right now. Many have gone to daily meetings or twice a day meetings. Here's one little tip I would encourage. If you can, not always able to do this, but if you can, go to Zoom or go to video where you can see each other. Even if you don't have the perfect background, people lose half the communication when they only get a talk by phone. And that's one way we can connect, if we can see each other's face. And when we wake up and we be present to that person, people need it more than ever because people are feeling disconnected. So something here you need to think about, and I need to think about, is how can I connect more with my people, even virtually? How can I wake up to them? Let's have a bit of fun around this one. I was asked not too long ago to go to speak in Banff, Canada. How many have been to Banff? Yeah, one of the most beautiful places in the world, isn't it? I was asked to go up there to speak to a bunch of lawyers on trust. Anyway, for those of you, haven't been to Banff, it's beautiful. You fly here from Minneapolis to Calgary. We dropped the 4 kids at the farm with Grandma and Grandpa, and then Lisa and I went and stayed at that Banff Springs. It was beautiful. But what happens is you fly into Calgary, and then you get a rental car, at least we did, and we started driving up the mountain. Banff is right in the middle of the Canadian Rocky Mountains. So you have to go by the guard shack where the park rangers are. You pay a little fee. They put a sticker on your car. You're legal to go into the Canadian Rockies. And then they give you this. This is the Parks Canada Mountain Guide. This is your guide for going in to the Canadian Rocky Mountains. Lisa is driving the rental car, so I can think about what I'm going to say to these attorneys. I start looking at the scenery. I start flipping through the Parks Canada Mountain Guide until something catches my attention. Bear attacks. There are 2 kinds of bear attacks. Ones that hurt and ones that don't. This is word for word. I'm not going to make any of this up. Never run. Don't climb a tree unless you know that you have time to climb at least 10 feet before the bear reaches you. I've never raced a bear. I don't know how long. Bears often mock charge or run past you. The bear might charge you many times before leaving the area. Don't shoot it when it's charging. The bear almost always lives long enough to maul the shooter severely. Welcome to Canada. If the bear does make contact with you, play dead. It was written by a bear. Lie on your stomach with your legs apart. Cover the back of your head and neck with your hands. I'm going to get frisked by a bear. Almost as if to say, don't worry. Defensive attacks seldom last more than 2 minutes. If the attack continues, it might have shifted from defensive to predatory. In this case, fight back. What? Ow! Take another bite. You got 20 more seconds. Now try to escape into a building or a car. This is the last line, and it's in bold letters. If you can't escape, no longer play dead. This might work with bears. It does not work in life. We got to wake up. Okay, so I'm noticing that those leaders that are doing well right now, they are waking up to their people and connecting often. And there's a whole lot of ways you can do that, but this takes intention and creativity in a virtual world. If you'd like more ideas, we can chat about that. So another idea, they are seeking wisdom. And, there's some leaders trying to do this alone. And it's unbelievable to me. But remember, if you're doing leadership alone, you're doing it wrong. It was never meant to be alone. You need a team. You need to connect with your advisors. You need to connect with your people. You need to have a place where you can resource and think through this. And the ones I'm watching do this well are more than ever asking for advice and seeking wisdom. Remember, one quick idea that we teach entrepreneurs often is, remember this, if you have a problem, okay, this is all there is to know about that problem, right? There's all the knowledge there is out there. And about that challenge, how much do I know personally about how to solve that problem? Well, let's be generous. Right? But how much do the people that you know about how to solve that problem? How much, if you just think of the people that you know, the friends, the advisors that you have, the people who have been through this before, how much do they know? Well, let's be generous. And how much can't be known about this, or you don't have access to? This much. But this is a whole lot more than this. And what we found is if people going through a challenge like this can just pause and think, who has been through something like this? Who does this know? I talked to my parents, my dad's 90 now, and we talked about, oh yeah, when we did it with tuberculosis, we had this quarantine. And when we had this, we had this quarantine. There's a lot of people you can reach out to that have been through actually not so different of things, whether it's quarantine or recession or other creative ways of doing these things. But you've got to get over to here. And you've got to remember, and I've got to remember, if you're doing leadership alone, you're doing it wrong. Next idea. They are thinking long-term and short-term. What do I mean? Well, the best leaders, what I'm noticing right now is they're actually thinking about the worst-case scenario. I just talked to someone who was recently had been in the White House and said, here's the reality. Pro sports is not going to take a 1, 2, 3 year hit. Owners of pro sports teams, it's going to be a decade-long hit. So I don't know if it is or not. But I do know that if you're a leader in pro sports, you have to then think of long-term, what's the worst-case scenario? You have to play those scenarios out. I've played them out for my own company. The leaders that I'm watching, they're thinking through all of the worst case. And then they're pulling back from that. Remember, this reminds me of the Stockdale paradox. And many of you know it. It's been written about. Admiral Stockdale was the highest-ranking leader that had been put in concentration camps in Vietnam. And he felt this great weight for all the any that would die, any of the other prisoners of war, and he was one. And when he was out after the war, someone asked him, what was it about those that didn't make it? And he said, that's easy. They were the optimists. They kept thinking, we'll be out by Christmas, and then they wouldn't be. Oh, well, we'll be out by summer, and then they wouldn't be. And what he said is interesting. He said those that made it had a paradox. They had an unwavering faith, actually an unwavering optimism about the long-term future. But they were also in the midst of that unwavering faith. They were able to pull back, and they were able to confront the brutal facts. And so what I've noticed great leaders do, and someone on my advisory council recommended this, is we have to think long-term and look at the brutal facts and what could be. And then we have to pull back, and we have to decide what is the best decision I can make for this week. He said, gone are the times where we're going to have a 6-month or a 1-year vision. We might have a big vision, but I mean a specific goal vision, not right now. In the midst of crisis and recovery, we have to pull back and say, what's the best decision for this week? Now, what's the best decision for next week? Now, what's the best decision for next week? And we have to think short-term and long-term. Finally, the leaders I'm noticing that are doing well are actually planting and cultivating their own seeds. And I remember when, my wife and I, she really had come up with this when we were thinking, what is it about individuals that actually can change a habit or make a difference? And she said, she just started noticing that, I think they've planted and cultivated their seeds. So in this time, leaders spend some time cultivating themselves. What are the seeds? The S stands for sleep. We need it. A lot of leaders, it's not easy. I'm not saying I haven't had any sleepless nights in this challenging time with feeling the weight of responsibility for my team or for those we serve. But don't be proud about not getting sleep. You need it. I think there's been, over the last few decades, leaders like, I only sleep 5 hours a night. I only sleep 3 hours. I haven't slept for 7 weeks. Well, that's not best. The first E is exercise. Move some. This isn't easy for everybody to do or to get out, but if you can, even right now while you're watching me, you could stand up, you could roll your shoulders. You could make more time for movement. The next E is eat right. Some of you know, 10 years ago or so, I lost 52 pounds in 5.5 months, and this changed me. And I remember the doctor saying, here's the deal. Do you want to drive a Ferrari or do you want to drive a junker? He said, what you put in, we put different fuel in a Ferrari. You got to put different fuel in, and you can't outrun a cheeseburger. And what he meant by that was a big cheeseburger meal has, the whole big meal, 1,500 calories or something. If you get on a treadmill for a half hour, you might burn 300-400 calories. You can't outrun putting in that kind of thing. So right now, if you're going to perform as a leader, you need to think about what are you putting in. The next is drink water. If possible, drink water. Many are dehydrated, they're finding, in this time. And finally, a source of strength beyond your work. I'm not telling you what to have, if it should be in faith or family or friends. I am telling you the leaders I'm walking with, they have something beyond their work, and that has made a difference in their work. So a source of strength, I think, we had the legendary football coach in the 1980s. I grew up in Minnesota, so we couldn't really cheer for the Vikings. So we had to have a good team to think about, and that was the Cowboys. So Tom Landry, I remember at national television, the young reporter sticks a microphone in his face after a game and says, Coach Landry, what is it about you? When you lose on Sunday or whether you win on Sunday, you're the same. All the other coaches I interview, when they win, they're all happy. When they lose, they get mad at me. But you're the same no matter what. He said, I don't know. I think it's because I have my priorities in order. If ahead of football for me is faith, family, and friendships. If I lose on Sunday, I got a whole lot left over. And that's something to remember even in this time. So take a pause and cultivate your seeds. These are some of the ideas I'm seeing leaders deal with in crisis. They're taking an active approach. They're dealing with the tension. They're leading with compassion. They're defining one key priority. They're over communicating. They are over connecting with their people. They're seeking wisdom from others. They're thinking long-term and short, and they're cultivating their seeds. And all of you that are certified coaches around the world have access to, of course, all the video and this deck, and you can use it to share with your people. But that's what I'm noticing. If you have any more questions, you can put them in the chat. And also you can ask for any information right here. I have a final story I'm going to share, but we also promised to show our reasoning for adding this whole coaching process. But maybe should I wrap up with the sheep story first, or should I show the other stuff first? Okay. I'm going to give you a 3-minute story here, and then I'm going to show you a 3-minute what we're thinking about. How do you transform your culture with trust? So let's do this. I'll see you in 3 minutes.
Back to Verndale, Minnesota. So we live down by the cities. Mom and Dad still live at the farm. Dad's 89, Mom just behind him, still running the 1,500 acres. And they kept calling saying, when are you going to bring the grandkids to the rodeo? Now, even though Verndale has these few people, thousands of people come from counties around to the big Verndale rodeo. So, Dad, I said a few years ago, I said, Dad, we'll be there. So we head up the 3-hour drive, took the kids out of school a little bit early on a Friday. We get there, we got a great spot on the bleachers. Kids are out of their city clothes. They got their buckles, their boots, their bandanas. They are ready for Verndale. They're excited. It's their first rodeo ever. If you haven't been to a rodeo for a while, this is how it works. The first half of the rodeo, the cowboys and cowgirls rope things. The second half of the rodeo, they get bucked off of things. In the middle, they let the locals get involved. They call it mutton busting. Who of y'all knows what mutton busting is? All right, for those of you a little more citified, it goes like this. The pros come in from Canada, Texas, Oklahoma. They do this great rodeo, but they let the local kids, 5 to 8 years old, in the middle of the rodeo, see how long they can last riding big Suffolk sheep. It's almost halftime. The big Texas announcer gets up on the microphone. Ladies and gentlemen, those of you kids or families that signed up for mutton busting, I'm going to read off the first 8 names. Come on down here to the bull gate, and we'll get started. And he starts to read off the names. Billy, Kimmy, Vanessa Horsager, Isaiah Horsager. I look over at my dad, the stoic Norwegian. He just smiles. My 5 and 8-year-old at the time look up at me in terror. I put my arms around him. This is going to be fun. We walk over to the bull gate. There's a lady to tell us how this works. All right, kiddos, here's what happens. You jump on the sheep. The sheep will take off. It'll run out in the arena, but the whole arena is sand. It's like a big, giant sandbox. This is fun. My kids aren't buying it. They know how to do this in Texas. It's a new thing in Minnesota. They don't know how to grab the sheep. They sit up like this. They hold on to the wool like that. The sheep skedaddles out of there, and the kid, bam, 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 every kid every night. Vanessa's one of the last to go. The lightest kid in her class. It was her birthday. She turned 8 that day. I said, Vanessa, you can't do it like that. Vanessa, you got to take those dangly 8-year-old legs. You got to wrap them around the belly. You got to pinch your heels as tight as you can. Vanessa, you got to lay down. You got to Velcro your belly to the wool. You got to wrap your arms around the neck. You got to dig your fingers into the wool. And whatever you do, Vanessa, don't let go. You got to hold on. I'm a great dad. They open that bull gate. This little girl, but but she's holding on across the arena. People start going, look at the little girl. Can you believe the little girl? What does that sheep do? It runs straight across the arena to the far corner where all the sheep that dumped off their kids are gathered. That's what they do. They gather and they laugh. The first sheep that it sees is Broadway's like this. This sheep streaks right at it. Bam! Butts it right in the side. Boom! She goes, ah! But she holds on. The sheep doesn't know what to do. So it around the arena. Second time around the arena, 2,000 people stand up, start screaming. She's a little bit sideways now. The stoic Norwegian has a tear. Third time around the arena. The clowns come out. Little girl, you can let go now. She will not let go. They finally get that sheep stopped in the far corner of the arena, but this little girl will not get off. 2,000 people screaming and cheering. The rodeo queen comes out with a trophy for the kid that lasted the longest. She won't get off. Finally, that announcer. Is there a dad here? I'll never forget it. I walk out into that arena, I pick off my daughter, she grabs onto my neck, and I will never forget what she said in my ear that night. Daddy, why'd the clown say let go? You said never let go. She was committed. And she just decided to trust herself a little bit.
Okay, so I'm going to give you a way to grab a free copy of a book and some other things, but here's the deal. We've got the case for trust. We've got the 8-pillar framework. Many of you are very aware of that. Today, we talked about a few ideas around the ways I'm seeing leaders build those pillars, even increase trust in the midst of crisis, and this is the greatest opportunity you have, right in crisis and in recovery. So I promised many of you, sure don't have to stay, but if you would like to, we're going to give you a way to get the copy, some of you at least, the copy of the brand new Trusted Leader. It's not out anywhere yet. In fact, I'll tell you, we have a few copies. The publisher pulled this. They love it, thankfully, but it's going to be held until March of next year when they can put them in airports and bookstores because nobody's going there. So it will actually not come out till March, but we have a few copies. And I'll talk about how you might be able to get one of those or one of the other books. After this, free shipping, free of charge, not like the people that say it's free, but you pay for this, and that includes everything. It's just, we're going to give you a way to do that if you're interested. But I promise this, that another about 2-minute video before we close out, and that is, many of you wanted to see how are we now able to use this work in a deeper way? How are we equipping people around the world? So we made some big decisions this year. This was ahead of COVID-19. This was ahead of coronavirus. This model we've been thinking about, putting a whole lot of financing toward building what we built here that you're going to see a glimpse of in the next 2 minutes. And we're happy to give any of you a free demo of this platform that you can use in companies, or you can use it as an executive, a coach, but it is state of the art. It's better, it's been so wonderful to see how it's already been used, even though we only launched this in April. And that was the plan for a long time before COVID. So here's the 2 minutes on that. And then I'll be back with you one more time. So we know high trust teams win. We know a lack of trust is always the biggest expense where people are concerned. We know trust is the root cause and the leading indicator in culture and teams. So why did we shift to a coaching model? Why did we start certifying Trust Edge coaches? Well, I'm on the board of a university, and we even saw the studies come out of Ivy League schools that were looking at, does online learning work? It turns out it doesn't, unless you have the right coach or teacher. So we want to equip teachers, trainers, facilitators, instructors in the right way to make an impact. And what have we learned? We learned coaches, trainers, facilitators, instructors, they need 5 things to be successful and make a real impact in the teams and cultures they serve. Number 1, they need premier content. They need a framework. They need to be able to give their people a common language. The Trust Edge 8-pillar framework does that. Number 2, they need measurement tools. They need a way to assess and close gaps so they can get results. What gets measured gets dealt with. Number 3, they need community and support. We not only have a social community where coaches from around the world help each other, give ideas, we also have weekly mentoring calls for all the certified coaches around the world with tips on how do you coach this virtually, or how do you use this assessment? How do you train that? So we continue to support our certified coaches. Number 4, reinforcement and resources. If we're really gonna create transformation and change in individuals, teams, or organizations, we have to have a simple, clear process for reinforcement and resources your people will use. Finally, to make an impact, you need flexibility with the content. We've had success with this work across 6 continents. We've worked with industries from pro sports teams to healthcare to agriculture. We've seen attrition drop using this work. We've increased sales using this work. We've increased engagement using this trust work. And what we've noticed is when we can help you contextualize it for your situation, your group of people, whether that's corruption issues in a part of the world or it's team issues on a pro sports team, when you can use this in your context, you can see results faster. The great thing about this platform and process is you get all 5 tools plus the support you need to drive high-performing teams and cultures on trust. If you're interested in increasing trust in your organization, your team, we'd love to show you a deeper look at the platform, and we'd love to partner with you. Okay, so I hope you enjoyed the time today and some of the thoughts. I believe a lack of trust is the biggest expense we have, and it matters more than ever. Now, do you have something? Oh, I got another slide? That's right. I'll get it. Oh, okay. Let's see here. Last slide, but I want to show you something else in person here. So if you would like some of the newest research, anybody that attended today can have access to that, and that'll be given you on an online link, and they're probably putting that in right now. If you are really interested in a demo, we promised a gift today. Totally free. You don't need to do anything with us. But for the fun of it, not a ploy, I hope, but for the fun of it, because the publisher sent these pre-published copies of the new Trusted Leader book, first, remember, it's not coming out till March of next year. First 30 people that schedule a demo, we're going to send one of those to you if you're in North America. All right. So that's for you. And you just as long as you look at a demo, if you're really interested in seeing how to use this deeper, because really what we want is we've created this platform. We're letting people on it cheaper than almost any other coaching network does. And we found this is the way we can use this to impact the world. We've been asked to do something like this for over a decade. And so there that is. That's free if you want it. Anybody else that doesn't get on the first 30, we're going to send them one of the other books other than the Trust Edge, and you'll be welcome to those. If you would like to schedule a demo, we just want to do that as a gift to you because we think you'll love it, we think you'll use it, and we think you'll be a part of extending and deepening trust in your part of the world, and that helps everybody. So thanks for taking the time out today, and my hope for you is you would start building these pillars of trust in your own life. Remember, why am I passionate about this? It changed me. So you and I build these pillars so that we can be trusted by the others we serve. Have a great weekend, and thanks for the time today. Look forward to partnering.